Well, good morning, everyone. How are you? Doing well? I'm glad to be back. I feel like it's been forever since I've been in this building, which it kind of has, because I was gone and then last weekend, obviously. This is why we need a building of our own, because when the school tells us we cannot meet and there's no heat in the building, we don't have any choice. So glad you guys have joined us to worship this morning. Hey, as promised, before I call these men up, we were supposed to introduce the local board candidates for the church last weekend, but because of unforeseen circumstances and no heat, that got pushed to this weekend. And so I just want to say a couple things before I bring these men and their spouses up. All of these men, according to the biblical qualifications for an elder in the New Testament, Titus, 1 Timothy, 1 Peter, they all fill all of them. Man, I'm super excited about these men. They love this church. They love you. They love just what God is doing and excited about for what God is going to do. For those of you that are new, we have a current board, but it was consisted of a couple of my pastor mentors when we planted this church, and the goal has always been to take in a board that is not here locally and transition to a local board at the church. And so we're excited because that time has finally come. Now, a couple weeks ago, I said we were going to introduce them last weekend and install on the 28th. Well, that has to be pushed because 1 week is not enough time from the introductions to the installation. And so I do want to say this, the installation, barring no major things that arise in the next 3 weeks, will be February 11th. We wanted to do the 4th, but one of the candidates already had an international trip scheduled, and so we were not going to force him to change that. So anyway, February 11th is the install date. I do want to say this, at Veneration, the qualifications are very clear, but I also want you to know that Pastor Raul and Pastor Gordon and Pastor Marcus also serve as elders in this church because they are qualified in that way. The board is just a little different role for the governing stuff, for the fiduciary responsibility, long-term just accountability to me, and that's the role of the board in the church, and that's what it should be. And so we're excited about this new season. So if the men and their spouses want to come forward, we want to introduce them to you guys so you all can see who they are, get a name to a face. All the spouses are here except for Jeffries. Rebecca is out of town, and so we do have a picture for her when she comes up. But and I really pray for me that my voice holds, because this is a big day in the life of our church, and I don't know why I've been sick for a month and a half, but I feel like my voice is going again. It's crazy, and it's very bad for a person that talks for a living. So I don't know how this is going to work. We'll see. But starting on this side, this is Jim and Susan Auersland. They have 3 kids, Nathan, who is 34, Luke, 32, and Andrew, who is 30. Jim spent his career in the oil and gas exploration business. Like I told the first service, he's very smart, smarter than me, and I don't really understand all that he did, but I know that he was good at it, and everyone that has spoken about Jim to me has had nothing but amazing things to say. Him and his wife Susan serve on the teardown crew. Susan, I've heard amazing things about you as well within the ladies' Bible study, and we're just excited that Jim and Susan have responded to God's call for this. The next here we have Tom and Kate Metler, and I got to open my phone because I can't remember all the kids' ages. They have 2 kids. Carrie is 27, Jackson is 25. Tom spent his career in business. He's done some farming. He's done all sorts of stuff. Brilliant, just a brilliant mind, brilliant business mind, loves God. Everyone, I told the first service of the D group, him and Kate lead a D group, and all of the people in their D group just raved about how amazing Tom and Kate were. Truly, their kids are amazing, just walks with God, and he's excited about what God is doing in this church, and just, he loves you guys so much. Jeffrey Scoggin, right in front of me, his wife Rebecca is not here. She is out of town. He was the founder and is a biblical counselor of Thriveology. Man, I told the first service, I was at the KMA, the Kalispell Ministerial Association, about a month ago, or I don't know, a couple weeks ago. I lose track of time. And they were brainstorming counselors in the valley and just who we would recommend as pastors if people are hurting, where to go to. And Jeffrey had a resounding, amazing reputation in that room. Every single person was like, man, Jeffrey is the real deal, and Tribology is doing amazing things. So Jeffrey has 4 kids. Austin is 28, Shaylin is 26, Maddie is 25, and Chloe is 22. Jeffrey just has an amazing reputation and just a man after God's own heart. He was a pastor for a little while, has a seminary degree, and just really God has just done some amazing things in and through him. To my left, you all will probably know Pastor Tyler and Alicia. Tyler is the executive pastor here. I told Tyler, I said, man, out of all the kids I forgot to announce, your kids are the ones that I forgot in the first service. But Peyton is 9, Cheyenne is 7, and Lane is 3. All the board members here agree and have seen extreme benefit to having the executive pastor sit on the board, and just, I mean, he does more with the staff than me. The reason this church runs is because of him and all of our amazing staff. It's not me, trust me. If it was up to me, this thing wouldn't exist, because I can preach, kind of, maybe. Some of you are like, yeah, not really on a good day. But like, it just frees me to preach and vision for the future. And man, can I just say this before we move? Can we just applaud our amazing staff that we have at this church? Truly is amazing. It's an honor to serve with them. I am a better man because of every single one of them. Jesse and Anna Scholes, they have 2 boys. Joseph is 17 and Bo is 15. Jesse works for Applied Materials, doing exactly what? I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it, because it's something tech and computers, and he leads teams, and he doesn't understand it either, he said. But he's much smarter than me. And so everyone that I have heard from about Jesse and Anna too have said, man, Jesse and Anna, they're the real deal. I've heard nothing. I mean, someone just told me the other day, Jesse, that you were doing some project or something for someone's house and you couldn't bear to charge them, and you spent like 18 hours on it and you just had to get it done. And like, that's the heart of Jesse. He has a servant's heart. He loves God. He loves people. Everyone that I've ever talked to just say, man, they're both amazing parents, and their boys are amazing as well. So all that to say, I just want to say that I am super excited for the new season in this church. And I am super excited for the men and the spouses in front of us that God has called to lead this church into the next season. I'm super excited for what that's gonna be, for the accountability that comes to me in that, and the church, and the direction. And I will say, moving into 2024, we believe that this will be a year where we begin to move towards a permanent facility. God, please let it be. So we'll talk more about that in the coming months ahead. But just some things that I don't know. I mean, I don't even know where we're going, but I've often told these guys, I don't know if it worked, but I would love maybe if the church, whatever we do as a church, that the facility would be used for the community throughout the week. Maybe we could do childcare during the week for parents that can't afford childcare and just go to work just to pay for their childcare, and maybe we could invest in them. I don't know, that none of these are concrete, but like, all that to say, these men in front of you are 100% behind this church. They're godly, they're qualified biblically, and I'm just super honored and humbled to be able to serve with them. So with that being said, I just want to pray over you guys and your spouses, and then we're going to continue on with the service. Father, I thank you for the men in front of me and their spouses, God, that they all love you, that they serve you, that they're surrendered to you. Father, I thank you for their faithfulness. I thank you for the ways that you have gifted them and called them. I thank you for their willingness to surrender of their time, God, to serve your bride. This is your church, God. It's not ours. It's not mine. It's yours. It's Jesus' church. And so, God, I just pray for wisdom and discernment in the months ahead as this board begins to talk through some of the long-term stuff. God, give wisdom, give discernment. We're so grateful for what you are doing. We're so excited and expectant for what you're going to do. So, Father, thank you that this day is coming, God, that this church would just be built upon you, God, that if something were to happen to me or anyone in this room, God, that it would continue on for generations to come, for we never know, God, when our last breath will leave our lungs, God. Only you know that. But I'm just thankful that these men are committed to leading this church well. And I pray for them and their spouses, God. I thank you for their wives that support them and love them well. God, I pray protection over them. I know that anytime you step out to lead something spiritually, the enemy wants to attack. So I pray a hedge of protection around them. God, I just pray that you would surround them and protect them in every way. We love you, King Jesus, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen. You guys can give them a round of applause. If you want to see the TV, we have a quick video, and then we're going to launch into it. I need to find my water.
So I moved here when I was 18. I was fresh out of a 2-year-long relationship. I was just completely lost and had no direction in life, and I moved in with my mom and my stepdad. I wasn't planning on taking any classes at the college, but I wanted to make friends, and so I enrolled in a class, and I met one friend the whole time I was at FECC. And it was Isabel, and one night she'd asked me about a tattoo I have on my ankle, and I had told her there's a cross on my ankle, and I told her that I'm not a super religious person, but I'd wanted this tattoo since I was like 8 or something, and she'd asked me out to coffee that day, and her and I went out for coffee, and she said she was going to go to a Bible study that afternoon and invited me to come. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm gonna go, but just to meet people and get involved in the community. I'm not gonna keep going to this, and I'm not gonna become a Christian and all this stuff. And so I went to Andrew and Michelle's Bible study that night, and like God just spoke to me so much that night. And I remember thinking, well, shoot, I guess I better give this a try, because there's something powerful going on here that I don't know about. The day that I noticed the biggest flip was when I got baptized on Easter. And after I got baptized, I was just completely changed. I was much more joyful, and I've been able to find the little things in life to be happy about and not just be grouchy all the time and pessimistic and hateful to people, but to be loving and try to exalt God in everything that I do now. I know that no matter what, Christ would have gotten to me, and he pulled me out of the trenches kicking and fighting. I did not want to come, and he pulled me out. But Veneration and the Bible studies that I've gone to have helped so much and have changed my life. Listening every weekend and tuning in and going to the Bible studies every week has helped God move through me so much and has completely changed my identity. He would have gotten to me no matter what, but everyone has helped him get to me, and it's just crazy.
Amen. How amazing is that if you're new to church, that is our mission statement. We are a movement for all people to meet and walk with Jesus. I just want to say that God does amazing things through the obedience of his people. I mean, thank you, Isabel, for your faithfulness. Thank you for just loving well. You never know what God is going to do with your next faithful step. You know what's amazing about Leah's story, too, is we found out she was with her mom in, I think it was Idaho, over Christmas, and her mom ended up surrendering to Jesus too. You want to talk about generational? Yeah, you can applaud that. You want to talk about generational impact, man. But just know this, that thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for pouring into this church, because there are many stories like Leah's that God is doing amazing things and pulling someone from darkness and placing them into great light, pulling them from death and giving them life. It's great to be back with you. I thought about not coming back after Christmas for this reason, because I told the 9 o'clock service, we were sitting down around a dining room table at Caroline's parents' ranch, and her mom said, "Hey, I have a question. On Christmas Eve, who was the terrible male vocalist that I heard online?" I'm like, "I don't know." And she played it. Well, come to find out, I didn't turn off my mic, and so to all the world, they heard my horrible rendition of Silent Night. You all can be very grateful for Marcus, because I do not have the voice of an angel. And I thought, oh gosh, did it pump into the entire gymnasium? Thankfully, it was only the live stream. But here I am, so grateful you guys are here. If you're watching online, welcome. Hey, I have a question. If I were to ask the question, do you want a happy and thriving marriage? If you're married in this room, you would probably think, well, yeah, I would want that. I mean, obviously. Or if you're not married, you're thinking, yeah, hopefully, I pray that God one day would have someone for me, and I would want a happy and thriving marriage. But then if I were to ask you, are you willing to do what it takes to get this? Time, sacrifice, selflessness, all the things that it takes to have a thriving marriage. Sadly, many people would probably say, well, I don't really want it that bad. That sounds a little too hard. If I were to ask, do you want the best for your life? You would think, obviously, I want the best for my life. I mean, isn't that a no-brainer? But then if I were to ask you, are you willing to sacrifice or lay aside some things to get it? The conversation may change. You say, well, maybe enough to be comfortable, but beyond that, yeah, it sounds like a little too much work. And then if I were to ask you this, which most people in this room would answer yes to this, I'm sure, on some level. If I were to ask you, do you want God's best for your life? God, the creator of heaven and earth, do you want his best for your life? You would probably say something like, well, obviously, I want that, but maybe I don't know what that is or even how to live in that. And then if I were to ask the question, are you willing to do the things and do what it takes to receive his best? You would probably say, it depends on what that is, right? Now, full disclosure, the gospel is a free gift. You cannot earn salvation, you cannot earn the love of God, and you cannot earn anything from God. It is a free gift of God. It is his grace and his mercy that draws you to himself. But then once you have been redeemed, he requires some action. And sometimes we miss God's best because we just don't know how to live into that, or we don't even know what that is. See, most of us want God's best for our lives, but we're either unwilling or don't know how to live into his best. Did you know that God blesses the one who obediently surrenders everything to him? And everything means everything. It doesn't mean the little parts that I kind of don't mind if I miss. It's everything. God just blesses in that way. We can see it all throughout Scripture, from Abraham to the nation of Israel to the Gentiles. Anytime God asks us to sacrifice or walk obediently, he has your best in mind, and he blesses that in various forms. Now, what I'm not saying is if you do this, then the byproduct is this. Some in this country is like, if you just give money to the church, then you'll be driving your Ferrari and you'll have an amazing house. That may not be the case. Can God bless in that way? Absolutely. But God's blessing is often more spiritual than physical, and we miss his blessing because we look for it in the physical. See, if we're honest, deep down, we all want God's blessing. That's why we pray for the stuff we want, right? You pray for the things you want because you want the blessing of God, but we struggle to surrender the things that he asks us to surrender, even if we know it's for our good. Why? I want you to think about this. Because we often view surrendering something as losing something, right? If I surrender it, then I lose it. That is true in the world economy. There are some things that you surrender that you will lose, but in God's economy, nothing that you surrender will you ever ultimately lose. See, with God, we actually gain more than we lose when we surrender. Now, what we gain may look different than what we thought it was going to be, but we gain because that's the God that we serve. He blesses those that surrender everything to him. And blessing is found in more, the blessing is honestly more found in just who God is and what he wants to do in you than all the stuff that you want. Blessing is found in God himself, not in just merely stuff. And see, we typically surrender, if you're honest like me, we'll surrender the things that are the most convenient, right? Maybe that which doesn't cost us very much, or that which we wouldn't really miss if it's gone. Do I need to make any other case than storage units are a multi-billion-dollar business? All the stuff they're like, I just can't afford, I can't let it go. I don't ever use it. I probably won't use it for 2 decades, but I'm going to shove it in this room, and maybe one day I'll come to a point where maybe I need it. See, we struggle to get rid of anything. But the things that we do get rid of are basically just things like, I'll never miss it. I want nothing to do with it. Talk about maybe cleaning your closet. I was doing this a while back. I went to my closet and I was like, I have all these shirts I don't ever wear. I'm going to give them to the thrift store. And so you start going through, you're like, I haven't worn this shirt in 3 years. Maybe I'll use it one day. And you hang it back up, right? I haven't worn these pants. They don't even hardly fit. Maybe I'll fit back into them one day. It's like we can't get rid of our stuff because we view surrendering something as losing something. We don't see that when we surrender, we actually gain more than we lose. That's how God's economy works. See, the problem with only surrendering the stuff we wouldn't miss is it's frankly not surrender. It's just purging things that we don't really need or want anymore. One of the greatest stories of surrender and blessing in all of the scriptures, I think, is found in Genesis 22, if you have your Bibles. This is the story of Isaac and Abraham being willing to sacrifice his own son. And starting in verse 1, we see this. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, now I want you to see something. God will not tempt you because he cannot tempt, but he will test your faith. Abraham, he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will tell you. Now, immediately, I want us to see this is not a fairy tale made up story. This was a real man, Abraham, with a real son who God said, okay, Abraham, I want you to bring your son to the altar and kill him. Doesn't sound very loving, does it? Well, hold on, and we'll see God's love in the midst of what seems totally illogical. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place in which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship. Talk about this in a second. And come to you again. This is crazy because Abraham's basically saying, we're going to show back up to you. Even though I'm bringing my son to the altar to kill him, we're both going to come back. So either he was lying or he had some expectation that God was going to move. Verse 6, and Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went, both of them together, and Isaac said to his father, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. And he said, behold, the fire and the wood. But where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Don't miss this. This is going to be key in a second. Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went, both of them together. And when they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Crazy. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know, God says, that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, "The Lord will provide." As it is said to this day on the mount, "The Lord, it shall be provided." And verse 15, and the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, "By myself," which, by the way, there's no greater name under heaven to which one can swear by than God himself swearing on his own name. "I have sworn," declares the Lord, because there's some causation in here, causal, God saying, because you have obeyed me, because you have done this and not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of the heaven and the sand of the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Why? Because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men, just as he said he would earlier. They arose and went back together to Beersheba, and Abraham lived in Beersheba. Now, we need to see something about this story. That, like it or not, where God took Abraham is where he seeks to bring every one of us in this room as well. Not to kill your son or your daughter, because God has already killed his son Jesus on the cross so that you can have life. But he desires to bring every one of us to an absolute and unwavering surrender so that he might bless. Now, you may call this extreme, right? An absolute surrender, what is that? In this culture, are you kidding me? Listen, it's not extreme, it's just called biblical Christianity. Jesus says, I have plucked you from death and given you life. Now I'm just asking that you follow me and give to me what is already mine to begin with, and watch what I might do with it. Here's a question to ponder before we launch into this. And I really want you to ponder this question, like in a way, don't just brush it off like, oh yeah, obviously, Luke. No, there's nothing obvious. Really think about this question and ask God to answer this question for you, in you. Here's the question. Is God the one thing that drives all things in your life? Is God the one thing that drives all things in your life? Now, if you're in this room and you're like, yeah, that's not me, guess what? That's okay. That's amazing. I'm glad you're here. There's no better day for you to be here, because guess what? God's just in the process of getting our hearts, and if he doesn't have it all, it's not like he looks down like, how dare you have not given your heart to me yet, you wretched son. No. He's like, I'm just thankful you're in this room, because life is about one faithful step after the next. So if you're in this room and you're like, I haven't even given my heart to Jesus, I just want you to know that you are right at home. And I just pray that God would begin to mold in your heart, and you would see maybe for the first time who he is. But here's the thing. If you want God's best, he must be first. There's no other way. You're not going to have God's best if he's second or third or eighth or 25th down the line. You want God's best for your life, he has to be first. Now, I want us to see three things that this text drives. It's going to drive where we're going for the next 2 years. And the first is this. God desires to bring us to a place of ultimate surrender to him. Now, this can sound scary, right? Ultimate surrender, like what does that even mean? Like I got to give up everything now and serve God? Listen, this would be extremely scary. Think about this. If God's like, hey, I want your heart, and when you give it to me, then I demand everything, all things in life surrendered right now, and you never mess up again. None of us would ever want to walk with Jesus. So here's the thing, if it sounds scary, that's okay, because here's the reality of God, is complete surrender involves a process. It does not happen overnight. And sometimes we get so burdened and bogged down because we're like, man, I'm not where I want to be. I haven't arrived. I haven't become the man or the woman that I want to be. That's okay. None of us will this side of heaven. The key is, are you on the process of just taking whatever your next step is? Because guess what? Complete surrender involves a process. Chapter 22, as we just saw, is really the culmination of Abraham's faith, you might say. Because how in the world could a man like Abraham literally bring his son to the top of a mountain and say, God says, kill him. And he's like, okay, God, I'll do it. What we don't see in chapter 22 is the years that Abraham had of walking faithfully with God, of seeing Abraham surrender and then expecting God to move. And Abraham would surrender again and he would expect God to move. Think about this, chapter 12. At age 75, God calls Abraham to leave his family, his land, and all that he owns. 75, which means this: obedience doesn't have an age limit. Think about it. Abraham, at age 75, when most people are checking out, and they're like, I've reached my portfolio and my retirement, and I'm just going to coast on into heaven. Not Abraham. He said, this is really where it begins. May I encourage you that if you are 60 or 70 or 40, whatever it is, obedience has no age limit. And God is on the process of getting and gaining your heart until the day that you die. So please don't check out, because if you're here, God has a specific plan and a specific purpose for your life. Fast forward to chapter 21. If you remember that Abraham had another son named Ishmael. We know that Sarah doubted the promises of God, that she could have a child at her old age. And so she says, Abraham, go lay with our servant Hagar, and maybe we'll get this child. And Abraham does it. And we see in chapter 21 that Isaac was not the first son that God asked him to give to him. In chapter 21, we see that Sarah comes and says, hey, I want you to send Ishmael and Hagar out of this place. And Abraham, because he loves Ishmael, says, no, I don't want to do that. And then God shows up and says, Abraham, do what she says. So Abraham has already given Ishmael up. Now he's at Isaac, and he's like, okay, God, this is just my life. It's a process of I surrender, and I expect you to move. And I surrender, and I expect you to move. Jim Elliot said it this way. He was a missionary martyred in Ecuador. One does not surrender a life in an instant. That which is lifelong can only be surrendered in a lifetime. See, as we walk with God, He begins this process of pulling out from under us all the props that we lean on until He alone is left. See, the reason it's a process is because if it was just like one time, boom, I'm done, all of us would fail miserably. Miserably. Thank God that He doesn't require that of us to be perfect on the day that you come to Christ. He says, no, none of you are going to be perfect till the day you die. You just come to me and then let me walk with you in the process. But the process needs to be moving forward. At this church, we talk a lot about our next faithful step. The key to a faithful step is not how big your stride is or how fast you're striding, but the direction in which you're striding. So all we see in Abraham is he had a lifetime of faithfulness to God, a lifetime of living surrendered and then expecting God to move. And this often hurts when God begins to pull the props that we lean on out from under us, which is why we must know this, that God asks for our surrender out of His love for us. And you think, how can this be? I will submit to you this, because He knows that you will be the most blessed when you trust Him the most. It's just how He works. He's the author of life. He's the lover of your soul. He knows how you tick, and He just wants your best. See, in His love, He will test our faith. We saw in verse 1, He tested Abraham. We also see in James 1:3 and 12 that God will test our faith to prove our faith. And if we pass the test, it reveals the quality of our faith. And if we fail the test, the good news for you and me is it's not like, oh, you failed, you're out. No, it just shows Him and shows us where we need to trust Him more. It's a process. Don't burden yourselves with the fact that I haven't arrived. None of us are gonna arrive. God has us on a process, and it takes a lifetime to refine us. I mean, how unloving of God if knowing all the fullness of blessing was found in our surrender and He wouldn't tell us that. The second thing we can see from Abraham is this, that ultimate surrender is revealed through total obedience to the difficult commands of God. I mean, think about this. Out of all the commands that God had given Abraham, this was by far the most difficult command He had ever given. I mean, leaving his land and his country, yeah, I can do that. All the journeys in between, giving up Ishmael, yeah, I can let him go, but at least he'll still be alive and around. But Isaac, hey, Abraham, I want you to kill him and lay him on the altar. And somehow Abraham has the ability to say, okay, God, that's what you want, here it is, and then I'm going to expect you to move. How do we know? Because he told the men he was going to show back up with Isaac. But the only way that Abraham can have this expectation of God is because he had seen him respond in his obedience in the past. It's a process. It's not a one-time moment, one time all fix all. Hebrews 11:9 shows us that Abraham considered that God was able to raise men even from the dead if he did kill Isaac. Now, this also seemed totally illogical. See, not only did it seem opposite of a loving God, but it also didn't make sense because if Abraham killed Isaac, then how would Jesus come? And Abraham's like, well, whatever, God's told me to do it, I'm going to do it. You know how? Because he lived a life, a habit of walking with God and watching what he did in response. See, we all come against the hard truths in Scripture, and some seem very illogical and some seem contradictory maybe. But what do you do in times like this? I mean, the easiest thing is just to make an excuse and say, that doesn't apply, or God doesn't really know. And I want you to say, if this is you, I just want to say in the most loving way I can, you can be assured that you are not totally surrendered. Because God knows best. He created you in his image, in his likeness. He knows what's best for you, and it comes through your surrender of what he's already blessed you with. There's some things in the Bible that I wish weren't there. It'd make life a whole lot easier, right? Tons of them. But I'm not God. Did you know that the best test of surrender is not obeying the commands that you like, but obeying the ones that are difficult for you to swallow? Think about it. If I tell Asher, hey Asher, eat all your ice cream, he'll be like, okay, can I have some more? That's not a good test of obedience because it's what he wants. What's a good test of obedience is when I tell him, hey Asher, quit hitting Rhett in the face and stealing his excavator from him. And then he throws a big fit. That's the test of obedience. Asher is great at obedience in the ice cream, but the difficult things, that's when there's some pushback. And it's the same with us, with God. Total obedience and total surrender is found in obeying the difficult commands of God, not just the easy ones. See, an unflinching obedience shows true surrender. How did Abraham obey? Well, the question is how in the world could he get to the point where he could actually do this? I would submit the answer is found in verse 5 of Genesis 22. It says, then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the boy will go over there to worship and come again to you. He viewed his surrender as worship, and he obeyed because of his unwavering confidence in the God who had always responded in the past. See, unflinching obedience to the difficult commands of God always stems from a confident faith in who he is, that God is true and he can be trusted. Regardless of if it seems impossible, regardless of if it seems illogical, God is on his throne, and we're all in a process. And man, you want to see God move? Start surrendering. Because the moment you start surrendering, you'll see him respond. Maybe not in ways that you thought, but it'll be far greater than anything you ever thought possible anyway. Number 3, the third thing we see out of this text is this, and then I'm going to launch into where we're going for the next 2 years. That God blesses the one who surrenders everything to him. Now, in my notes, I have everything in all caps as a reminder from me too. That it's not just the things that I won't miss and the things that are convenient, but everything. All means all. Everything means everything. We see it in Genesis 22, 16 and 18, as God swears by himself, because you have done this and not withheld your son, I will bless you, because you have obeyed my voice. See, if you lack assurance in the promises of God, the only thing I can say is just start obeying him. In the smallest things, like the tiniest things. You want to see God bless your marriage? Start loving your spouse better. You want to see God bless your time? Give him some time back that you've just hoarded for yourself. I mean, the list could go on and on and on and on, but God is so gracious. And you know what the crazy thing is that God blesses us by providing the very things that he asks for. God blessed Abraham by providing another sacrifice. See, sometimes we view blessing as future and fail to think blessing has actually already been blessed in the past. The fact that you're sitting in this chair right now is a result that God has blessed you with time, that you're still upright. The fact that you have giftings that God has wired in you stems from the fact that he has already blessed you with the giftings. The fact that you actually have money in your bank account or very little wherever you're at all stems from the fact that God is the one that blessed you with money. See, this is an amazing truth about God. Think about this. Wrap your mind around this, that God blesses us by providing the things that he asks of us. He doesn't say, hey, give this to me, but good luck finding it. He says, no, it's all mine. I've given you everything. It's all mine. The things that I want to bless you with, I've already blessed you with. And if you'll just give it back to me, I'll just bless you more. Like, it's wild. It's God math. I don't know how it works. The other thing we see is God blesses us by giving the assurance of his promises. He did that to Abraham. See, Abraham's act of obedience brought forth God's blessing. If you lack the assurance of God's promises, man, just start obeying him. The littlest things. Some of you just need to surrender your life to Jesus, and that's your first step. Some of you just need to be like, man, I'm just going to, God, just help me to be more honest at work, or whatever. We blow him these huge things. It's just the little steps of faithfulness that God honors. And the third thing we see is that God blesses us by providing for our future needs. In 24, we didn't read it, but Abraham had to be thinking, man, how is Isaac going to find a wife? I mean, he couldn't marry a Canaanite woman, and now God spared him, and God's just like, oh, Abraham's like, whatever, God's going to provide in that too, because he's always provided in the past, and sure enough, God provides a wife for Isaac, just as he said he would. One night, there was a family of 5 crammed in this VW Bug. They were driving down the freeway, it was pouring rain, they're all like, you can hardly get the doors shut, because they're all in this little Beetle. And they're driving down the road and they see this family walking, and it's a couple, and the lady's holding the baby, and they stop and say, what's going on? They said, oh man, a lightning strike hit our house and caused a short and burnt our house to the ground, and we're on our way to the next town to stay with my sister, and there was no room to bring them into this VW Bug, so the guy found a 20 in his pocket, gave him a $20 bill and said, man, I'm so sorry, whatever, gave him a 20 and drove down the road. But about 5 minutes down the road, he stopped and he asked the rest of his family, he said, hey, do we have any more money in this car? So everyone started pulling their pockets out, and they came up with $100, and he turned around and he drove back to this couple that were walking down in the pouring rain, and he looks at her and he says, hey, do you still have that $20 I gave you? She's like, yeah, why? He's like, I want it back. And she's like, what? Want it back? He's like, seriously, give it back. And reluctantly, she gives it back, and as she gives it back, he pulls $100 out of his pocket and gives her $120. Now, I want you to see this, that God may not pull you from the rainstorm, and God may not pull you from the trial of your life and the thing you're dealing with right now. He may not remove that immediately, but he will always provide in the midst of it. It's just how he works. The problem is we like to cling to what is not ours. The lady could have clung to the $20 and she never would have seen the $120. See, because we do not believe that he blesses the one who obediently surrenders everything, we think we own it. Now, what I'm not saying is give money and then you're going to have more money. That's not what I'm saying. You may have less money. You may have more money. I don't know. God does his thing. But what God will do something inside of you that far surpasses anything the world can offer. But here's the deal with God. He will always bless that which is surrendered. He just will. I don't know how it works, and I don't know why it works that way, but I know for a fact that it's all over Scripture. Now, the blessing may look different than you thought you were praying for, but he always blesses those who surrender everything to him. Abraham became very good at surrendering everything to God and then waiting expectantly for him to respond. You know who else was good at this? King David. Now, think of King David. Sinner, but also a man after God's own heart, he said. Sin with Bathsheba, the murderer, actually had her husband murdered. David was like all over the map, man. Like, you want to relate with someone, relate with David. Like, moments of glory, flashes of glory, and then moments of great despair and drowning in sin. Can you relate? I can. Every week of my life. So here's David, a man after God's own heart, and he also got good at this. Look at what Psalm 5:3 says. "O Lord, in the morning you hear my voice. In the morning I prepare a sacrifice for you and watch." We see three things in this text. The first is this: David acknowledges that God hears him. Now, some of you just need to hear this. God actually hears your prayers. He may not answer them in the way that you want or in the time that you want, but he hears the prayers of his people. It's just who he is. He's alive. He's living and active. He hears you. He cares for you in the midst of your pain, in the midst of your deepest struggle. He is right there. David knows that God hears. But then he says this: he surrenders something. He prepares a sacrifice, and then he watches, or in some translations it says waits, expectantly. So here's the deal. Here's where we're going for the next 2 years. We're going to go on a discipleship journey together as a church, and it's called the 5-3 Life. And it comes straight from Psalm 5:3. And here's what I am expecting: 100% participation from those who call Veneration Church their home. Because this is not like some initiative that we're trying to push. It's a lifestyle that God has called us to live. See, it's for your best, not mine. And it's a fact that Jesus commands his followers to be all in. Look at Matthew 16, starting in verse 24. Then Jesus told his disciples, if anyone means anyone, by the way, that's why we're a movement for all people to meet and walk with Jesus, would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross, this is surrender, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Guess what? Your portfolio and your assets are going nowhere after this world. I'm just telling you, they're going to burn quicker than you can imagine. Or what can a man give in return for his soul? For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done. Bristling a little in your chair? That's a good thing. You know what's crazy about God? And sometimes this gets a bad rap because we say, well, we shouldn't talk about storing up for ourselves treasures in heaven, as we're going to talk about in a few weeks. We shouldn't talk about that because that's just selfish. If it was selfish, why did Jesus tell us about it? Why did he tell us to do it? Because he's calling us higher. He said it's not enough for you just to get saved and then wait for heaven. He said, no, your things, the things that you do, the things that you surrender and expect me to move in, those things will be rewarded one day, and it's so much greater than any of the garbage on this planet. Jesus is saying, if you will follow me, if you want to follow me, you must be all in. There's no if and buts about it. Follow me or don't. There's no middle ground. But remember, it's a process. He doesn't expect everything right now. It's a lifetime. See, here's where we're going. The 5-3 life is this. Live surrendered, wait expectantly. Live surrendered, wait expectantly. Abraham and David were 5-3 life type of men. They waited, they lived surrendered, and they waited expectantly. See, when we are surrendered, we can expect God to move, but it's hard to expect him to move when we aren't surrendered. as your pastor, I would totally be doing you a disservice and unloving you in ways that I can't even explain if I knew that God's best was found in your surrender and never called you to surrender. Like, shame on me, man. Just to tell you, you can have it all. You can have all the blessings of God. All you got to do is wake up in the morning. Listen, at salvation, God has blessed you with salvation. If you have believed him on Jesus, he has blessed you with salvation, but that is just the beginning. Now he's saying, let's do this thing, guys. Let's do this together. You want my best? Surrender something to me and watch me move. But don't expect me to move if you just sit on your hands and just wait for heaven. You want God's best? You better start surrendering. See, my prayer for the next 2 years is this: that you surrender more than you've ever surrendered, and you expect more than you've ever expected. The 5-3 Life is not an initiative, and it's not a Ponzi scheme to grow this church. It's becoming the people God has called us to become. It's living the life that God has called you to live. It's not extreme. If it's viewed as an extreme, then we have a messed up view of the Bible, man. It's not extreme. It's called biblical Christianity. Live out your faith. Surrender and watch God move. Surrender and wait on him to move. Watch what he'll do, and he'll blow your mind. See, I'm asking that you be here for the next 5 weeks. And if the mountain is your distraction, then you already know what you need to surrender. I told that 9 o'clock, if the mountain is your God, I'm just going to start praying that God sends rain and melts all that beautiful snow. And if my prayers don't work, my mama's do, and I'm going to put her on it. See, guys, we really need to own this thing. And if you have to miss, like, whatever, I'm not this legalistic whatever. I mean, if you miss it, I'm just asking you at least go to the app or the website and listen for the next 5 weeks, because the next 5 weeks are going to traject us where we're going for 2 years. My heart is that in 2 years, you would see God move in ways that would absolutely blow your mind. Because I can promise you, there's nothing more exciting than being in the center of what God has for you. Remember how we saw earlier that surrender is a process. It doesn't all happen in a moment. It happens over the course of a lifetime, which means this. The beautiful thing about this is this, that it means regardless of wherever you are right now, God says, start there. If you don't know Jesus as your Savior, start there. If you've been saved for a while and you just kind of found yourself just apathetic, just start there. Give him something, man. Give God something to work with. If you've surrendered some, but not all, just start surrendering more. And watch what he will do. Here's how I would put it. Just put the stinking white flag in the air and wave it. Say, God, I'm yours. Did you know that the white flag is an international sign of surrender? In war, if you wave the white flag, you lay down your weapons, you lay down your packs, you lay down everything, and you tell whoever you're the enemy, and listen, I'm done, you win, I lose, I'm yours. That's all God's saying, is just wave the white flag and watch what he will do. Why do we surrender? Because Jesus surrendered on the cross. And why do we expect? Because God has promised to respond. See, in 2 years, I pray this, that you would have surrendered more than you've ever surrendered, and you would look back and see that you have been blessed more than you've ever been blessed, and that's not all physical. I told the 9 this, when you, well, I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to get back to that, because that's how my brain works, and I can do whatever I want, right? I'm the one up here. Here's my ask. That over the next 5 weeks, you would start praying, God, what do you want me to surrender? Not, I'm going to surrender this to you, God. Like, okay, God, yeah, I'm going to give this to you, and it's the thing that you're like, yeah, I won't really miss that much. It's a little something. I won't. No. If you start this whole journey with, God, I'm going to give this to you, and you haven't even prayed about it, you've missed the entire thing. It's, God, what are you asking me to surrender? What are you asking me to give to you? And I am going to write that down. Now, on your chairs, you all have this journal. we felt this was a worthwhile investment into your walk with Jesus. This journal is for you to do whatever you want to do. But here's one of the things I told the 9 is, I want you to put some things in this journal that you're going to surrender this year after praying about it. And rather than putting, okay, God, I'm going to surrender this, and then I'm going to expect this from you. That's fine. I mean, God will sometimes answer that. But here's what I would say. Hey, God, I'm going to surrender, and then I'm expecting blank line, and let God write on the line. Because what we do is we try to view it as, I'm going to surrender this, God, and then you give me this. God, I'm going to give you, I'm going to be more generous with my resources, you give me more money. God, I'm going to give you more time, therefore you give me more time. God, I'm going to use my talents, therefore you better get me a better job. Like, whatever. I mean, we usually write like, okay, God, if I'm going to surrender, then I'm expecting this. How about, hey, God, I'm going to surrender my time. So this year, I'm going to spend a little less time on my hobbies, and I'm going to invest that back into my marriage and my family, and I'm just going to expect you to move in ways that you know you need to move. Hey, God, I'm going to surrender my plans to you. God, here's my plans, because we're the ones that set our plans in our heart, right? But God orchestrates the steps. So God, here's my plans. I'm going to surrender that to you. And then God, I'm going to expect you to move, blank line, and look back in 2 years and see how he moved. See, it's not this game that we play. It's not this genie in a bottle. God, I give you this, and then you give me that. God, I give you this, and you give me that. God, I give you this, and you give me that. No, it's God, I give you me. I give you my time, my talents, my treasures, and my plans, and then I expect you to move. Over the next 5 weeks, we're going to talk about every one of those, and I'm not going to tell you what order I'm going to talk about them in, because you'll plot. You'll be like, oh, I really want to know about God's plans, but treasures, off limits. Time, it's a good one. Talents, no. So you don't know which one it's going to be. I know, but you do not know. But here's my prayer, that over the next 2 years, we would go on a discipleship journey together. That you would literally see God do things that you never thought were possible. And it would all start with living surrendered. Give him something and expect him to move. We have these bracelets on the way out. You can grab one if you like. I mean, this is also we didn't do these so we can start some Drink the Kool-Aid club here. But I wear it. There's 2 different widths. We're going to order some smaller diameter ones too for if you have a smaller wrist. But I've used this multiple times in the last 2 weeks. In fact, I was in the gym this week, and just so you know, anytime you're going to take a step and do something for God, the enemy wants to attack and destroy. That's just how it works. So you have to be on guard and ready. And it's been a very rough couple weeks for me. And when I was in the gym, I was working out, and my brain was racing through some things and just some stuff that was going on. And I looked down and saw 5-3 Life. And I said, live surrendered and wait expectantly. So I said, all right, God, this is yours. I'm not going to hold on to it anymore. It's yours. I'm going to surrender it to you, and I'm going to expect you to move. Here's my prayer, that as a church, for the next 2 years, you would surrender more than you've ever surrendered, and you would expect more than you've ever expected, and you would look back in 2 years and say, dang, God, you are mind-blowingly amazing. That I never thought, God, that when I surrendered, I would actually gain. I thought if I surrendered, I would lose. It doesn't work that way. You may not gain what you want to gain, but you'll gain what God wants you to gain. And when you gain that, there's nothing that compares. You got to trust him, man. I don't know how to tell you. It's up to you. I can only do so much. You need to live surrendered and expect God to move. Because here's the deal. If you're not going to expect God to move, what a hopeless existence. Why would I want to serve a God that never did anything? That never moved on behalf of his people, that never fought the battles for his people, that never went to war for his people, that never went into the middle of a marriage for his people, that never went into the middle of a relationship with his people, that never went into the middle of a business with his people, that never went into the middle of the deepest hurt of someone's life. Why would I want to serve a God like that? The answer is, I wouldn't. I'd be out. God loves his people so much that when they surrender, he responds. And his people ought to expect him to do so. You want a healthy marriage? Give it to him. Take some of the time from your hobbies, inject it into your marriage, man, into your friendships. Take some of your time and from your business, inject it in something worthy. Like, I'm just telling you, I could go on and on, but all that to say this, that you would use this journal for you and God, whatever you want to write, a gratitude journal, surrender and expectation, what God's teaching you. Part of it is that you would bring it for the next 5 weeks and write and take notes on what God is speaking to you because he speaks through his word. But you would use this as a tool so that you could look back in 2 years and say, dang God, I never dreamt that you could be so good. And guess what? There's going to be some pain along the way. But remember what I said. Walking with God is a lifetime of him pulling from under us the things and the props that we lean upon until all that we have left is him. Because that's all you need anyway. You want God's best? Surrender. You surrender, you expect him to move, and watch what he will do. If the band wants to come up, I'm going to wrap it up. In this last song, there's a few lyrics, and I love these lyrics. One of them says this: here I am, down on my knees again, surrendering all. Now, one of the things that kind of drives me nuts about like what we've labeled as the American church or whatever, is we come to worship and we stand here and we sing songs, and then we sit down and we listen to a message, and we stand up for meet and greet, and it just becomes so routine. Man, did you know that to worship you don't have to be standing? Do you know you could actually be sitting? You could be on your knees. You could be in the back corner waving your flag. However you like to worship, God is less concerned with the posture by which you're worshiping as much as he is the posture of your heart by which you're coming before him. And I say all that because I never want to create something that's like, man, we worship, we stand, and we just lift our hands. Or we stand and we stare at the screen. Or whatever. Be free to be you and worship and do business with God. In this song, if you want to sit in your chair and start praying, God, what are you asking me to surrender? God, show me what you want me to surrender. Maybe he's already shown you, God, give me the strength to surrender that. Give me the strength, and I'm going to expect you to move. Then sit in your chair and do it. If you want to stand and lift your hand, stand and lift your hand. If you want to stand and just stand. I don't care. What I'm concerned about is that you do business with God. Like this song says, here I am, down on my knees again, surrendering all. Then it goes on to say, I surrender. I want to know you more. Like a rushing wind, Jesus, breathe within. Lord, have your way. Like a mighty storm, stir within my soul. Lord, have your way. If you want to come up here and kneel and do business with God, that's amazing, man. Do it. And no one's going to look at you like you're weird. And if they think you're weird, they're the ones that's weird. Because they're too proud to do business with God. And guess what? God doesn't look on the external. He looks on the internal. And so you want God's best, you surrender. You get on your knees, you stand, you worship, you wait, you listen, whatever. You go to the tent and get prayer. I don't care. What I care about is God's best for your life. You want God's best, you better start surrendering. And when you surrender, you give him a blank line that says, God, I'm expecting you to move. Blank line, and let Jesus take the pen and fill that baby in and watch what he will do. It's his pen for his glory, for his name. Jesus, the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and author of life, the pursuer and lover of your soul, who wants nothing more than to you just to come to a place and say, God, here's my white flag. I'm surrendered. Here's my guns. Here's my ammo. Here's my gear. Here's my pride. Here's my arrogance. Here's my sin. Here's my failures. Here's my rejection. Here's my pain. Here's my hurt. Here's the ways that I was mistreated. Here's the pain of my past. God, here's the memories that burn into my mind. God, here's my surrender. God, here's all of me. God, would you have your way? And God, I'm going to give it to you, and then I'm going to expect you to use your magnificent pen to write my story, because the expectation is his, it's not yours. So ask him what he is asking you to surrender, and watch and wait for him to move. At this church, we will be a bunch of people, a bunch of 5-3 lifers. It marks the way we live. We know God hears, we surrender ourselves, and we expect him to respond. Father, I thank you for this amazing day.